Thanks very much, Joe, and thanks everybody for being here today.
So I'm Anja Maciagiewicz. I'm a vertical solutions consultant working with Maciagiewicz. So that's all of our claims-based products, and we'll go into that a little bit in our presentation today.
And I'm Emily Mortimer. I'm the Director of Product Delivery and Analytics. I also focus on all of our medical claims-based solutions, having responsibility over the team that works on building those products and supporting our customers as they use the data solutions that we offer. As many of you may be aware, LexisNexis is really much more commonly known for being a really large legal database. There's a lot of spaces in which LexisNexis has a very large footprint, and healthcare is a more recent venue for them. So we wanted to just focus our presentation today on how LexisNexis makes a difference in healthcare. Specifically, we'll talk about our claims-oriented solutions. We'll talk a little bit about claims adjudication and how remitted claims, or the claims remittance information, can be impactful in your businesses today. So the main focus we want to talk to you about today is all of our solutions oriented around reimbursement information. And we wanted to kind of just tease it a little bit and get it more into the weeds in a moment. But the important thing here is to note that in addition to a lot of the more commonly known medical claims-oriented solutions that kind of let you focus on provider volumes, understand where patients are being seen, things of that nature, what we're also offering is a suite of solutions oriented to understanding payment. So that includes knowing things like what the variation of payment is across payers or across regions of the country. You can really get at a lot of important information that helps you to market your products and helps you to understand kind of the space in which you play and what providers are, seeing when they go to use your products and eventually get reimbursed for that use.
All right, and for a little overview of LexisNexis, we work with insurance, with healthcare, we work with different government agencies, and we collect data. That is our bread and butter. We collect data on everyone. Everyone in this room has what we call a Lex ID, and we get information from insurance records, bankruptcy records, but drilling down into healthcare specifically, bringing it down a little bit, we are able to work with the top payers and health systems. We work with the top 10 retail pharmacies, the top 20 life science companies, and again, even within healthcare, we work with different federal and state agencies. So what is MarketView? As I said before, that's our claims-based products. So within the med device space specifically, we have what we kind of refer to as a three-legged stool. We have three different products that really help companies like med device companies, pharmaceutical companies, target and find the right people to talk to. So our volumetrics can tell you what a doctor does, what kind of patients they see, and how many patients they see. Our referral networks can tell you where do these patients go, which doctors have a relationship with each other, and where do those patients go and get treated. And lastly, what we're going to talk about today is the remit data. So how much does a claim cost? How much did a payer pay out to a physician or a facility for a certain procedure? And looking at the broad level of the medical claims database we have over 1.6 billion claims that we get annually. That equates to over 1 million practitioners that we have data about, over 400,000 organizations, and we're able to update our data as frequently as daily, so we can give you near real-time information.
So I'm sure there are plenty in the audience who know a lot more about this process than I do, but we find that when we're speaking with customers or really anyone about our solutions, it's important to start with a few basics about medical claims, claims processing, and adjudication. So there's a lot of steps to the process. Importantly, you start with the actual visit to the physician's office, and the adjudication cycle really summarizes how physicians go about getting paid for the services that have been rendered. After the visit, typically coding is entered. These days in an EMR system, that's a lot more real-time and helpful, but you often have coding review, things like that happen. And large facilities like hospital systems will have nosologists who take a lot of responsibility for this work. There will generally be verification and review of the claims done prior to submission, and at this point, a claim submitted to the company for payment is considered an 837 claim form. This is really just getting at the differences between the submitted and eventually the paid or remitted claim that you'll be seeing. Unfortunately, there is often a denial and a change process that you would go through as a provider, so it might be that some elements on the claim just simply don't line up and need to be resubmitted. If the patient's gender is marked as male, but some procedure like a mammography was done, you're likely going to be asked more questions about that, and maybe it was just a typo. So going through that process, potentially resubmitting the form, the insurance company finalizing and signing off on the validation, and payment being issued from that insurance company. And at this point, a new form is kind of created, and that's really where we're getting the insights for our provider reimbursement insight solutions. The last thing I did want to mention about this is that another kind of key part of what we do at LexisNexis has to do with the ways in which we acquire this data. So because we have this adjudication system, a lot of third-party companies exist, clearinghouses, switches, they're typically called in the market, to help facilitate this process for providers so that you are not putting out a lot of your money from a provider perspective in this process. And it is through those clearinghouses and switches that much of the data we are going to talk about today is acquired. Lastly, I just wanted to highlight a couple of key things. Again, many of you are probably quite familiar with this, but understanding what is present on a submitted claim is pretty important to the kind of backbone of what solutions we can provide, and of course also understanding what's not present. So a lot of the interesting things that we've talked about around kind of capturing data from medical devices or clinical notes from an EMR system, things of that nature are not going to be present on a medical claim because in this case it's really dependent on what a provider needs to identify in order to be paid. So pretty limited, but you do access information about your ICD-10 diagnosis and procedure codes, CPT procedures if that's relevant, a specific drug code or HCPCS code in those cases. You'll have information about patient demographics to kind of help to further differentiate your population if that's of interest. And then again, information about payers, practitioners, and locations of care. On the remittance claim, which happens after the process of adjudication, you have access to a subset of those pieces of information in addition to additional information. So you are still seeing what would be considered procedure line information, so CPT, HCPCS codes, because that's really what you are getting paid up for. You're not seeing diagnosis information, and now you also have access to the payer information that was provided. So that includes the payer or insurance company. It also will include the amount that was covered for the claim.
All right, so what kind of information do you get if you were to get our remitted product? So high level, we're telling you the payer, who paid out the claim, the average amount that was reimbursed, and who got paid, whether it's the facility or the physician. And this data set, this product has over 2,500 payers and over 550 million unique claims that make up all of this information we can pull for you. And Emily's gonna go into a couple of examples, but before she does that, we wanted to talk about the use cases. So why would this be valuable for a company, specifically a medical device company? The most common use case is actually being able to figure out the return on investment. So if you have a piece of equipment that you're looking to rent or buy in an office, looking at how much you get remitted or how much you get paid every time you submit a claim can help you figure out how many times do you have to submit that claim to start seeing a return on your investment. When do you start making the profit? We can also help with competitor pricing. So being able to create pricing models to stay competitive, monitor and respond to market changes, and providers can figure out how to get the maximum reimbursement. And they can do this by using the modifiers or place of service on a claim form. And lastly, it can help with contract negotiations. So being able to look at what different payers and facilities are paid and figuring out how to use that for your pricing and contracting strategies.
So for anyone who has previously or goes on to work with us, one thing that you will learn is that we really like to tell the story of what our data can help you do, but we find that it's most impactful if we can really demonstrate it by showing you the numbers themselves. So in this case, we've pulled together, kind of in support of some of those use cases Anja mentioned, actual samples of the data solution that you would see in order to help really kind of clarify what you can see. So in this case, we are looking at the remitted claims solution data points, specifically for an oxygen concentrator code. And in this case, it is a product that is generally supplied through HME or DME companies to the patient in their home. And it's, kind of a known product in the market. This isn't something where I would necessarily go in anticipating significant differences in how things are paid because it's been around for quite some time. But you can see here that when we look at this across payers, you do see variation. Specifically, I would call your attention to the median payment amount, where we've done the work to control for outliers on the both high and low ends. And you can see that we are still seeing, even between United Health and Aetna, where you have two private payers, a jump of $7 in terms of the median remitted payment back to the physician. I think, or in this case, I should say, likely back to the HME supplier, not the physician. So it's interesting there. I mean, I think on a single case that might not seem that significant, but you can imagine how that scales up and has a pretty significant impact on what's being reimbursed. Again, you can see a number of other data points here that Anja mentioned. I'll just call out for clarity. So we do report out things like the modifier, so you can ensure you're holding consistent for how the product is used. whether it's, in this case, rental of a piece of equipment versus purchase of equipment, in which case, obviously, the price would be significantly different, to really give you the insight into how those various factors impact reimbursement. Moving forward, we wanted to talk a little bit more at a kind of high level. So in this case, we're looking at the ways in which the median payment vary in a very broad region. So this is across the entire state of California, and we're looking at the same product here, looking at not just where does the median shift, but what is the range of payment accepted across these different payers. And I think this is really interesting to me. So let's go straight forward to Medicare, where you can see there's almost no range. Medicare, we all know, right? They've defined their payment plan, and in this case, they stick to it. Good to see they're consistent, but not really a surprise. But you look at something like Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and you see that the variation in payment is really significant. So you're looking at payment amounts that can be as low as about probably $20, and payment amounts that go as high as, even ignoring the outliers for a moment, if you look at that third quartile, we're talking about payments of nearing $100. So this information alone isn't going to tell you why you see that variation, but it is an interesting thing as you think about your contract negotiations, because you want to understand what's going to be an acceptable range for those different payers. Another piece of information that can really impact the payment and reimbursement information is setting of care. So in this case, we're looking at a set of codes that are all pretty specific and similar to each other. You might consider them biosimilars, although people kind of throw that word around a little bit. These are for blood products in the IG space, and all of them have use cases at very different settings of care. What's interesting is that even where two products can be used in the same setting of care for normal purposes that are approved, the payment can vary. So in this case, you see that for one product, J1561, its median payment in the home setting, or HME, is only around $8, whereas a competitive product has a median payment of $13. Again, these are not hundreds of dollars different, but scaling them up makes a pretty significant impact on how they've been used. And the office setting, you don't see quite as big of a jump between two single products, but from the low end to the high end, you similarly see a jump of about $5. So it's really interesting to kind of see that play out. And the other thing to note here, because these are infused products, is that these median rates do hold units consistent. So this is not being skewed by the fact that one product might require more units to be infused than another product. Using that same set of codes again here, we're looking at the ways in which the payer differs by product. So you can see that for a single product, payment variation happens between payers, and you can even see across the payers. So looking at the fact that United Health Group is red for all of these products, the fact that the lowest payment for them is a code that is a higher payment for Blue Cross Blue Shield. So it's interesting to see that the same pattern doesn't even hold true. So it's not that United always pays the most, and it kind of differs by the products. So we wanted to make sure that we left some time for questions, and I think the most important kind of thing here is to think about how this could be used for you guys in your market. So we talked about being able to use this for an ROI calculator. That's certainly something that providers can do themselves as they think about capital expenditures, but it can also be a part of a medical device company's marketing effort to say, we know that your return on investment will become clear after X utilization of this product. And I think it's a powerful way to be able to kind of bring that message to bear, in addition to what medical device companies will do to negotiate with payers and be a part of kind of marketing their products more broadly.
When you began to wrap up, I immediately went to grab, it was like, where'd my mic go? But it was well worth it to surrender it to hear you both present. I have a question, and that is, how does the typical account respond when you come in and say, I know all this detail about you? I know if somebody, gave me that level of detail about me before I had met them, they'd be like a little creepy.
Oh boy. So really in this case, it varies a lot by vertical. Wow, this is a much more responsive mic. I think what we see often is that so we play with med device companies, with pharma companies, and also a lot in the provider space. So when you go to a hospital system and you tell them what you know about them, they mostly just want to tell you that you're wrong. They know everything about themselves. What we know about them is complete, it is comprehensive, it allows for competitive intelligence, but it's true. We said, there are 19 procedures done with this J-code, and they actually have 20, and so they're going to point that out. But when it comes to speaking with pharmaceutical and med device companies, in general, it's more around having a strategy conversation. So we're not saying what we know about you as a medical device company or what we know about you as a pharmaceutical company. We're saying, what do we know about the landscape in which your devices and your products play? How can we help you to focus your efforts and energies in the right place, make sure you're using your resources, and make sure that you're telling a really good story to all of the providers and the facilities that you're working with?
Tell me how you actually help people integrate this data into their processes. I can imagine, one group made the decision to bring you in. It might be the marketing side, it might be the sales side, getting them in the same room, talking off the same playbook type of thing. I imagine that's challenging. How do you go about it? How successful has it been? If you could share an anecdote or two. Yeah, it's her turn. Give her the mic.
So a lot of times it's the people going out to find the people, the doctors, who are they targeting, but also a lot of the pricing groups. So how do we know what to price this device at, or how do we price this drug? How can we compare that to our competitors that might be on the market? I think people see this product and know it can be helpful, but people are scared to kind of dig into the pricing a little bit. They wonder, oh, how do you have this information? Are you allowed to share it?
Mm-hmm.
And we are, and for our clients who have used it, they've definitely gotten a lot of value out of it. So
I think one other thing I would just state about that is kind of bringing the people together. So kind of depending on the scope of the engagement, it can vary a lot. So we may or may not need to bring IT resources to bear to really load and process data, because it might be that the data set someone is interested in is small enough to put into an Excel file, and it can be worked by a single analyst, and it's not a really large enterprise-wide solution. But there are certainly engagements we do where we do have an entire kind of implementation team, and we want to ensure that we're focused on ways to kind of build out a relationship that'll be sustainable, that will make utilizing the data over time easy and consistent and not too resource intensive for our customers.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Sarah Wright, and I have a question about, I really like the collection and treatment code data, and I understand you can't have, identifiable patient information, but how deep does that demographic data go? Do you have any instances where you have data sets where it can trigger that this is the third time, no information about the patient's name, et cetera, but can you see repeatable data sets, or can you see when someone presents and needs these treatment codes, do they then also have existing disease states that have, I'm just more interested in how do you put all of that together in terms of repeatability and being predictive and proactive?
yeah, so I'm thinking of some of our additional products that I mentioned in the beginning. So some of our volumetrics, we're able to figure out when a patient may have come in for CPAP but also had COPD. So we can look at a history, we can see what the patient has had, whether it's been on the same claim or has it occurred within the past 12 months. We call that a co-occur with our volumetric data. For the remit data, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so what Anja is discussing is really related to the fact that while all of our data is de-identified, we do have a unique patient identifier attached to the claim, so we can look at things kind of over time. There are various ways we can put solutions together that look at those different criteria. From a remitted solution perspective, most of what we are doing right now is not as much kind of patient cohort related, and part of that is because what we are leveraging here is just the reimbursed claim by itself, the ERA, a lot of folks call it, and we do not yet link it back to the submitted claim. But that's really the next phase of this product, is to say, now that we have linked those two claims together, we have all that patient demographic information, we have the diagnosis information on those patients, and we'll certainly be building robust solutions like that in that product line in the future.
Yeah, Gunter Vessel's Liquid-Smart. So are you able to do some trending across reimbursement by payer and so forth in a cat? How about switching between different kind of modalities like lithotripsy to laser in urology?
So I think that it's going to be a little bit dependent on what the indicators are for the modality switch. So if for a lot of those things, it'll be based on the modifier. So we would have access to that and could look at it over time, or for a specific provider. But it's just going to depend on how that's coded on the claim.
Hi, two quick questions. Oh, I'm sorry, Alex Gerworth, AKN. Two quick questions. One is one of the things that surprised me actually was when IMS was acquired. Not by you folks, but and brought into Equivia. How do you interface with drug data from IMS? And then the second part, which is somewhat related, is are you folks making any efforts to work with some of the major EMR vendors to get clinical data to correlate with claims data?
Great questions.
So
I don't want the mic. You take the mic. I don't want the mic.
We absolutely do work to kind of partner with other vendors who have access to drug data. We do not specifically partner with IQVIA, and there are absolutely reasons why their DDD data is very strong, but we have great partnerships that can help solve that problem. We don't have the prescription data in-house ourselves. And in terms of the EMR, so there are conversations that we continue to engage in around ways that EMR data can be helpful and be kind of impactful in our products. It may or may not be kind of related to a volumetric type solution. Some of what we're actually looking at are almost, other investigations and other analyses. So things like patient clustering pre-diagnosis for a rare disease state or something like that, where the clinical notes are really informative in the absence of a diagnosis. But those are kind of all in the nascent stage. I wouldn't say we have an offering in that space.
I'd point out that the folks in this room are but a microcosm of the folks watching in TV land. So if these questions are an indication, there's a lot of interest in how to use data to be smarter about going to market. So Anja and Emily, thank you so much for joining us.